Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Experience Podcast. Those of you who are on the YouTube, you know the next steps. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you can be informed on absolute golden bombs and nuggets that are dropped. So trust you and your families are well during these times or previous times, depending on when this episode actually dates. And yeah, I do experience shares of myself as an entrepreneur, investor on the industry, and bring on others as well. And today we actually have Whitney Sewell, who is the founder and operator of Life Bridge Capital, which his sole focus is income producing multifamily. Love the multifamily. He is the host of the Real Estate Syndication Show with over 500 interviews, and with Life Bridge Capital as well. He's got just at $60 million under management and just over 500 doors, or just under. So welcome to the podcast, Whitney.
My pleasure, Sterling. Pleasure to be here. I enjoy you and your show a lot.
Yeah, and one thing that I've always been poking Whitney about, because he does a daily podcast, that I say, you know what, let's just increase that to 2. So we've always had this back and forth for a while.
Why not, while we're at it, right?
Yeah, so could you give the audience just a little bit of, I would say, your life journey, your 5 or 10% from what ultimately got you to where you are now?
Yeah, you said this is about a 2-hour show, right, or 3 hours? So we got plenty of time.
Couple days.
So I like to, and I won't give you every detail. Happy to share it, but for time anyway, we'll go back a little bit though to tell you, because I know we're going to talk about mindset a little bit. So I want to cover a little bit, of how we came to the mindset and things that we're at now, or me personally, and so I'll go back to March of 2001, and I say March because it's important, because if you can remember March of 2001, like the country was doing great, right? I mean, we just thought everything was just going amazing, right? And so I joined the military in that month, and that was 6 months before. Well, it was 6 months before our country was attacked, our nation was attacked, right?
Oh,
and
wow.
So
yeah.
At that point, I had no idea that soon I would be spending a year of my life in Iraq, right, toting around a machine gun, praying every day I would get to go home.
You had a machine gun? You were actually in the
I had a couple of machine guns. Yeah. So I was a gunner on an up armored Humvee. I had a 50 cal machine gun, had a SAW, which is a squad automatic weapon, also. So never imagined in March that a few just a couple years later that's where I would find myself. Wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I'm thankful that I've served. I'm thankful that even more importantly, thankful that I was blessed to make it home. Not everyone in my squad even made it home, and so wow. Prayed every day that I get to come home, and I'm so thankful that the Lord just protected me and many others, and while we were there, but came home, and or I'll back up. That military though is such good with training, right? And one thing
structure.
That's right.
Yeah,
I love the structure. I love the uniform. And one thing that they really just beat into you is the never give up mentality. Like, it's just not an option to give up. It's not, you can't, I mean, what good does that do you? Or, I mean, other people are going to die if you decide to just give up, right? Mm-hmm. It's just not an option. And so, I really contribute some of that mentality to my military training, my time overseas, in many circumstances there, but also when I came home, I decided to try to become a police officer. And so I applied with numerous.
So just curious, and I know you're still in the story, because you went from military and now police, is it something about helping people in that? What was it in particular?
So, the military, I just thought it was the right thing to do. Like, I didn't have to think about it a whole lot. I just thought, you know what, this is the right thing to do. I want to serve. And so it was pretty simple. I was 17 at the time. I thought, okay, I'm gonna do this, and did, and I think I wanted to serve, but I didn't, didn't think that probably deeply into that. I knew it was a big decision, but coming home at that point, it was like, what am I qualified to do now?
Got it. Okay.
I love being in uniform. I love the structure, and so policing was just a really easy segue, really. Just the mindset, all that, the discipline. And so, I applied with numerous agencies, but the one I really wanted to get hired with was Kentucky State Police, where we lived at the time. There was 1,200 applicants and only 5 positions. And I was blessed to have one of those. And so, but still, that never give up, obviously tons of training, academy, all that stuff, but that training, that never give up mentality was still so important. And it had to show from the way I wore my uniform to the way you respond to every dispatch. So important. It doesn't matter if I'm standing on the side of the road with somebody. People have no idea that, if you're not in law enforcement, if you haven't thought about this before, but the way you wear your uniform is so important. It saves your life. Okay. People that are professional criminals, they know the officers to mess with because of the way they hold themselves, because of the way they wear their uniform. If they're slouchy, they know they're slouchy in other areas as well. They know they're not fit. They know they can't take care of themselves. They know the easy ones to pick on. And so, it's important the way you wear your uniform, and I say that in business as well. It's just important the way you present yourself. And the way you promote yourself, all those things, and so, but still that never give up mentality was so important. And so, and I won't spend a long time on this next part, but soon I became a horse trainer. And so it was a passion of, I know I get that face all the time.
How'd you, that like, transition?
Actually, I'll back up a little more, because during that same time, I became a professional horse trainer. It was a passion for a long time. To ride horses. I was still doing that while working full time. But also while I was a police officer, because of the lack of income, that's what pushed me into real estate.
Got it.
So, making, less than $40,000 a year with no room for advancement, got married. And then it was like, okay, as much as I loved working the road as a police officer, it just wasn't what was best long-term for our family. And my new bride and all those things, we just passed each other in the hallway the first whole year of marriage and said, okay, this is just not what's best, So I began looking for some other way to supplement or a different career move, and in came real estate at that time. It was 2009.
And at this time, Whitney, you're still full-time police officer and doing some horse, the horse industry, or what would you call that sector?
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of horse training at that time, but not much. I'll save that for another, in just a minute. And so, So, at that time, it was 2009, got into real estate. That's when I was riding some, but not training at a big level as far as horses. But I was looking for some other way to supplement our income. I thought, okay, so many people have built wealth in real estate. I can do it too, And so it was just that mindset. Okay, if they can do it, I can do it.
Did you read any books or anything, or you just had that idea?
So at that point, I wasn't raised around other entrepreneurs. I wasn't raised around other people in real estate. Had nobody around me really that was doing this, but, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, read, some other books. That's the one that comes to mind that really just opened my eyes to the wealth that can be created and just other people that have done it and been successful. And that, it's not rocket science. There is a lot to it, but, I can do it. It's just that mindset shift of, wait a minute, there is this big world out there that I can accomplish this. If all these people can do it, I can do it too. So we dove in right then and bought a couple triplexes in Kentucky, and we can get into that. But at the same time, I actually was applying to become a federal agent. And so I became a federal agent, special agent. I have that title,
Okay. Is this FBI or are they separate?
So I was working for an agency, the United States Department of Transportation. They also have federal agents, that work for them as well. And so, I was employed there for a number of years, but a great job, right? It was a great job. Most people would die to have that position. However, so it increased my income, but it's still, I quickly maxed, that position availability or income or.
There was that was the ceiling.
That's right. I quickly got to that ceiling. It's like, okay. What's, and I was still doing some of the real estate stuff, but now I was also training horses professionally, and I was traveling, doing clinics and teaching people horsemanship skills. We had a farm, we had a nice house, and then, one summer, or I'll say one fall, my wife and I were at the beach. We were on a little vacation, and we were just praying, and we were reading different books, and, it just kind of hit me that the horse training, I was still doing, I had a few rentals at the time, up to like a 15 unit. So small multis and a few single family, things like that. But that was really my blinders were really on to that. Like I didn't have this vision of being able to buy anything larger than that. If you'd have said, Whitney, you can go buy a 100 unit complex, I would have laughed at you. Said, "Oh, you're crazy,"
So
but,
would you consider, well, we'll get into the limiting beliefs at a later point.
Yeah, because I definitely had them. But at this time, my wife and I just had peace about, or actually we realized that the horse training business, as successful as I had become at that really quickly, and actually I was selling horses for more money than I ever imagined, in a very short period of time. So it could have been very lucrative. However, it was never going to be passive. And I was always going to be the one that people wanted training their horses or riding their horses or whatever.
It was all active. You had to exchange your time for money.
That's exactly right. And so it finally hit me that, okay, as much as I enjoy this and I could make a decent living doing it, it's never going to be passive. It's always going to require me to be there. And I already, was in real estate a little bit, but I finally came to that conclusion, or knew I had to make the decision. I've got to, like, real estate's going to be the thing. It's going to be the business I need to grow and focus on, but I can't do both.
Got it.
Can't do both. Mm-hmm. And so while we were on the beach, we were just praying and just spending time together and thinking through all this. We decided to completely cut off the horse training business and sell our farm and sell everything related to the horse training.
Wow. And the police side too, were you still, I was
still a federal agent. Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. I was still a federal agent then. And so I knew I couldn't do all three things. Right. I was in the arena till midnight, most nights and most weekends, all day, Saturdays, so, family time was almost nothing, even then, but I was willing to sacrifice and make it happen, just like we've done in the real estate business as well, to get going. However, I knew that distraction was always going to be there. And so, and we were also pursuing our third adoption, or adopting our third child, which also is extremely expensive and time consuming. And we wanted to make sure we could handle that financially and just the time consuming part. So we decided to sell everything. And within a month, our house sold much quicker than we expected. And there we went, into the syndication business.
And what part of Kentucky did you own your rentals, or did you live where you owned too?
We did at that time. When I lived in Kentucky, we bought those two triplexes, like in the same town where we lived at that time.
Okay. Was this the city of like Louisville, Lexington, or was this like
It was in Glasgow, Kentucky. Actually, it's a little bitty town, and it's close to Bowling Green, South Central.
Okay. Gotcha. Understood. So one thing that I really do want to impact is limiting beliefs. So I thought that was really fascinating what you mentioned earlier, and I had pointed it out that you were saying, wow, I can't take down a 100 unit. Or so my question to you is, what is one limiting belief, let's say in the past 5 years, that you've had and you identified it, and what was that more empowering one that you replaced it with?
I think initially it was, I can't buy something that large and people are not going to invest with me, or just kind of scared of that. Are people going to invest with me? Like, what is that really going to happen? Or no, I can't, that's just not going to happen. Or maybe 10 years from now, maybe it's, after I've done a lot more small multifamily, or something like that, just not believing that that's even an option. And then, again, I started going to lots of conferences and meeting lots of people in this business and started growing my network really fast. But ultimately, I started meeting, again, just kind of like when I first started, and reading about people that were doing this and thought, okay, I can do this too. But now I'm meeting people that are doing it at this scale, and really they hadn't been in the business a long time. Like I've met so many people who have only been in the syndication business a couple of years, and they have hundreds and hundreds of doors. Just $100 million under management. And I'm like, okay, again,
if that person can do that, I know I can.
I can do it too. That's right. That's right.
Well, don't want to say it like that, but I get, yeah.
Yeah. And nothing against them at all. They're very smart, intelligent. They've made it happen. But I just thought, okay, if and it's not just like one other person, it's many people. And if all these people can do it, I can do it too. And so, it's like, okay, I can do it. We're going to do it. We're shifting our focus. We're not focused on small multis or single family anymore. We can do this. And so then came the branding and the podcast and all that stuff, and just traveling a lot and meeting tons of people and growing our network as fast as we can.
Gotcha. So you said one, the limiting belief we had mentioned earlier was just determining, okay, it was, I'm not able to get something that large, take down that deal. In order to get to that point, I've got to build up my portfolio, which is what most people do. Myself, per se, I started with single family, got up to 150, which was I'm exited out of all those. And then I had my first multifamily was a 46 unit deal. And then for you, you said to overcome that, you met with others that you were able to, that allowed you to shine a light that, hey, if that person's able to do that, then I'm fully capable of myself. And would you say that took some, I wouldn't say self-awareness, but you realized your skill set, and that was confidence and belief in yourself that allowed you to overcome that too?
For sure. Definitely building some confidence, but also just taking the blinders off. Like, I think for the longest time, like it just wasn't even there. I didn't even know it was an option. I didn't even think about it as an option. It's just this thing that everybody believes. And I was told this too, when I first started telling people, like, we have a small meetup in Roanoke where I live now, that I've been, I don't attend as much now, but a few years ago, I was there all the time. And, obviously, everybody. When I started saying, I just think that, like, everybody there is looking for small multis or mostly single family. So when I started talking about, I'm going to build this brand, I'm going to try to syndicate a large property, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait, and they've been doing this 30, 40 years. And they're like, well, most people will do a single family, a few of those, duplex, and maybe a fourplex, and kind of build up, it was that type of mindset. And so eventually I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I have to really be careful about who you're surrounding yourself around.
That's what I was just going to mention. Very interesting. Yeah. Who you surround yourself. What do you believe, if it's Zig Ziglar or Jim Rohn that says the 5 people you surround yourself with, you can identify your closest, your net worth, or
that's right.
A composite of you. So do you believe that those people were looking out at your best interests, or they just didn't know? What do you think it was that allowed them to try and pull you?
I think that they did have my best interest in mind. I think they cared about me. Okay. But I think that I, at the time, wasn't thinking about, are they where I want to be? Okay.
Wow.
Like, is what they're, is this person I'm seeking advice from, or are they where I want to be? And they weren't, they even doing it many, many, many years, they still had a very small mindset ultimately of what they could accomplish, and have they done big things? Yes, but not maybe in the asset class or the way that I wanted to do it.
Got it. It's a subjective, whether they're scaled to someone who's just getting started. Yeah, understood. And so what failure would you say in your experience through your multifamily, before I get to that, take the segue of the personal branding, because that's something I've seen you do a phenomenal job at, and I've seen you at other networking events, people approaching you, very familiar with your voice in itself. Is how vitally important you believe personal branding is in today's age?
It's so important. Like, I cannot tell you, like, I don't even remember the statistics on like how many thousands of podcasts now are started every day.
Mm-hmm.
But
do you
just
still believe there's enough?
What's that?
Do you still believe there's enough with the amount of consumption versus what you said, 1,000 per day?
Enough podcasts?
Yeah, enough podcasts. Exactly.
So I honestly think that most people have the wrong thought process behind why they're not starting a podcast. They're like, I'm not going to start it because there's so many, or, there's so many real estate podcasts. Like, I just can't stand out, or I hear that every week almost. People schedule calls asking me about how to do a podcast. And I'm like, it's the wrong mindset. Like, why are you doing this? It's not because you're going to be unique. You're not going to say anything on your podcast that probably hasn't already been said somewhere else. I'm sorry to tell you. It's just, it's just not going to happen. However, people get to know you because of your podcast, and you create your own following. Even if it's only 200 people, guess what? That 200 people are going to know you and like you and trust you. And that's going to be some of the first steps to creating that investor base, or, to branding yourself and those things. So, or they go to your website and they see you've done 200 interviews or 50 even, it's like that builds credibility for you. They get to hear you, every week or whatever. and that's why you're doing it. It's not so you can have the top podcast on iTunes, because unless you're ready to fund it in an extremely big way, it's just probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So very important to be branding yourself. If you don't have a brand, how are people going to know you? And right now, even think about our current market or state, like you can't get out and go to a networking event right now. So you better be online doing something.
And I feel people are shifting more to just listening while at the gym, listening while learning. And how has personal branding worked out for you, whether that's being able to get deals from brokers, getting investors? How's that work for you?
Well, my whole focus in the beginning was obviously building my investor database, but people getting to know me, like I talked about. And because nobody in this industry knew who I was 2 years ago, and now, like you said, going to a conference, it's been really neat to see that change. Now everybody knows who I am at most conferences, and if there's somebody that's a active operator like yourself, well, you've probably been a guest on the show as well, and so we already have that connection. And like it goes back to you talking about like your network is closely equal to your net worth, and so thinking through that, you think about, people say, and I'll go back a little bit and say a mentor was key in my process of doing this. Same time we were selling the farm was the same time I was signing up for a better mentor than I'd ever had, or higher caliber. Okay.
Gotcha.
Very important. But he also helped me, encourage me through the podcast and branding somewhat. But during that time, I reached out to lots of people who were already doing podcasts, just like I'm sure you did, and everybody does, to me too, when they're starting a podcast or wanting to. And, and all of them told me about how much work it was going to be. They all said, Whitney, it's so much work. It's just so much work. Can't get this done and can't get that done. But the one thing they all had in common was that they were doing a weekly show. And so,
gotcha.
It made me question myself, right? Like, wait a minute, is this crazy? Doing 7 a week, it's
that's what I was going to say. So when you were approaching them, you were saying, I'm thinking about doing a daily podcast.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're like, you're crazy. There's no way. Yeah. It's insane. Right. And so also I'll say I went at some of those new events that I was going to, there's 2 people that probably everybody listening to the show would know of. I won't say their names, but extremely well known in our space. And I was talking to both of them over dinner. It was just us. And I was talking about the podcast, obviously saying, I'd love for you to have you on the show. But we hadn't launched yet. And I was telling them about it being daily. And both of them were like, Whitney, what? That's crazy. Yeah, you don't do that, And so, especially coming from them, I was like, okay, wait a minute, maybe I should really rethink this. And so, but I went back to my mentor and I was sharing these things, and he's like, Whitney, that's why you have to do it, because nobody else is willing to do it.
It's so interesting, the different types of mindsets. And this goes back to that, like during, let's say the 2008, 2009 times where things were in the industry going downhill, that you have the operators, you have people that say, it's not a good time to buy, it's the worst, we're at the bottom of the market, where you had the more optimistic people that really did well during the downtimes, like it's the perfect time to buy. It's just so interesting, those different dynamics of
that's right. It is. It's so interesting, but I'm so glad that I had that mentor and I had surrounded myself by somebody with that kind of mindset as well, and also that I seek to that wisdom, and and I was like, okay, I mean, that's really the kick in the pants that I needed again, to say, you can do it. And I was like, okay, now I'm back on it. I can do it. I'm going to do this. I'll figure it out,
Awesome.
And so that's, it was like, okay, then I was, I had that mentality again. We're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. We'll figure it out.
And so with that, the figuring out, what lessons have you learned, one per se, that is later set you up for one failure that's later set you up for success, whether that's a deal, a podcast episode, or maybe a personal experience?
A failure, and when I think about, obviously we all have many failures, right? But as long as we learn from them, we improve.
Failures, no one makes failures.
And I would say too, if you're not experiencing some kind of failure every once in a while, like you're not trying hard enough.
I agree.
you're just my sergeant with Kentucky State Police. I'd receive a few complaints here and there. Obviously you're making that many traffic stops. People are not happy, obviously, that you're getting pulled over, right? Everybody can probably relate. You're going to get complained on. But I remember getting this complaint one time. My sergeant, he had me in the office, and, he tried to be real funny and act like it was this big serious thing, but then he just laughed about it, and he just said, if you're not getting a complaint every once in a while, you're not trying hard enough. And I just think it's the same thing in business. Like, you're going to have a failure. You're going to learn from it. And we're going to try to mitigate those as much as possible, of course. But one failure for us was really those first triplexes. I mean, that was probably my biggest failure in real estate was those two triplexes. I mean, as far as an acquisition anyway.
Okay.
Obviously podcast has had numerous failures that we've learned from and improved, and gotten better. But in that deal specifically, I didn't do proper due diligence. I trusted the realtor, the broker, way too much. Even the seller, way too much. Like, we created a relationship and just felt like they were on my side, right? Like I said,
so was it the rehab was a little bit too much? The rents were actually lower than. Could you a little bit deeper in terms of what was it?
So I think that I expected that I could take rents higher than I could. Okay. I think there wasn't enough demand there like I had hoped. Okay. I self-managed, which was another mistake, but I learned a lot. So I'm thankful for that now. Right. Mm-hmm. But also just trusting the realtor too much, and some of them are extremely trustworthy, but I didn't verify enough,
Gotcha.
But also the due diligence side. I hired a reputable company to come in and do due diligence. I followed this guy in every nook and cranny and attic space, trying to learn as much as I could, but really trusting their brand, right? We talked about how important branding is. I trusted their brand, okay? Extremely well-known company and organization throughout the entire U.S. And he went through and made sure that everything was working, okay? But it didn't help me to think about, okay, well, these units, like these heat and AC units, are the original units, from
gotcha.
73 or whatever, like, you better be thinking about replacing probably this one and this one and this one and probably that one over there too, within the next couple of years, and I didn't account for stuff like that. I accounted for some maintenance stuff, but I just didn't see the big picture. I didn't think about some things like that I should have. And even there's managing the tenants too, you can't manage a business with your heart ultimately.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be so nice to these tenants. And I remember, I'll never forget this one tenant. I laid out a whole budget for her. Like, she was late every month, and like, I finally sat down with her. I'm like, okay, what are your expenses? Like, I laid all this out. I'm like, okay, you're going to be late the next 2 months. You don't have any choice. I even gave her some spending money, like, you're going to be late the next 2 months, but then that next month you're going to be able to be on track, and no, it never happened,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
But some, just some key lessons there that have helped me, long-term and doing bigger deals now, and have been just invaluable.
Gotcha. And I love that you mentioned the trust but verify, because on my very first deal, there was the wholesaler that sent me over the deal, did the underwriting. They mentioned the rehab was this, and then actually ended up closing on it. The rehab ended up being more. So that's one thing I learned on my very first deal, is to trust, but still verify. And the due diligence is the quote unquote non-sexy part, but it's definitely essential. And you're looking for ways to not to ultimately kill the deal and not fall in love with it, to where you oversee all of those red flags that may pop up.
Right.
And so in terms of on the switching to the tactical way, how are you finding deals in today's market?
Whew, that's a hard one. Right?
I would love to know that.
So, are we still looking? Well, of course. Are we? I think there's so many unknowns. Today's April the 6th. There's still so many unknowns.
Oh, you dated the podcast episode. No,
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. We're good.
So, it's. And I'm hesitant to do that on my own show, but like where we're at in the market, because it could change so much in 2 weeks,
Just a week?
Yeah, even a week, 2 days. Yeah. So are we still looking at deals? We are. And actually, I've probably got more response from brokers lately than ever, However, it's like, well, are we adjusting our underwriting and all this? Well, of course. If somebody's not, I'm not sure what they're thinking at the moment or what they're expecting this next year to be like as far as at your, units. But, are we finding deals? Well, I don't know if they're deals yet. we're still underwriting, we're still looking at lots of deals, but really just judging the market and waiting. Okay, we're going to wait, maybe give it a few more weeks to really see, are they really going to lock our country down for 18 months? I don't think so. But, if that happens, you can forget any business, I mean, it's going to be so many bigger problems that we're going to have on our minds. How to eat and how to survive is going to be one of those. Not about how to cut your hair, get your hair cut, So, but finding deals, it's probably something that we're not as concerned about at the moment, just because we're not planning to submit an LOI this week. Would we, if it was just a slam dunk something, yes, we would, but we're going to have, you're going to have so many contingencies in there because there's so many unknowns as far as financing and all those things that you don't know if it's going to happen in the next 30 to 60 days.
So with that, have you say you've been shifting more on optimizing the podcast or just other operations outside of the acquisitions element, just due to that uncertainty?
I would say, so much focus has been shifted to optimizing our on the ground operations.
Okay.
I mean, like that's obviously, and it should be, I think everybody's focus. I mean, just your operations are always so important, but right now you better believe they're important, and you don't want people moving out, is a problem. You don't, and most I think are not planning to move out right now. It's such a, unknown time. However, if people's, leases are coming up, like I want them to stay. We're not, normally that's when you would take people to a premium rent, and or maybe up their rent, but not at the moment. We want somebody in there that's paying as opposed to a vacant unit, right? And so, just when we don't know what, even next, the next month is going to bring as far as the first.
Yeah, the ripple effect of everything.
Right.
Is just,
right.
Yeah. And so on that, and I know we had touched on it earlier, is in terms of how are you attracting investors? Is it primary podcasts? I know you're the personal brand and everything funnels through you, correct?
It does. Yes. Yeah. So podcast is obviously the biggest outreach for me. That's where we find most of our investors. And even going back to that, starting a podcast or brand, it doesn't happen overnight. 500.
No way, it doesn't.
I tell everybody, like, expect to do it a year before you see much return on your podcast. Just already have that in mind that it's going to take that long. Then maybe you won't quit. Ultimately, I hope you have some success or some return in, 4 to 6 months. But if it takes a year, I want you to be willing to push it out that long. And so, the podcast is what, is driving most of my investor database. And like we talked about, it's where they hear me every day. And so I've had people that schedule calls or sign up on the website and they're like, yeah, I've been listening to you every day for a year. I thought I might as well reach out to you. I'm like, yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
A year it took you this long, but that's how it is. Just repetition. And
some people are right away, and then some just, they finally listen. And it's like, oh yeah, I finally just wanted to connect with you,
And so now shifting to the rapid fire sharing round, where I just have 3 quick questions for you. The first one is, what is one unusual habit or absurd thing that you love to do?
Probably the first thing I can think of is bulletproof coffee.
Okay, what is bulletproof coffee?
So every morning we're early risers, and that's another habit that's ultimately I almost feels crucial. But during that time, my wife and I have bulletproof coffee. We have lots of butter and raw milk. Okay, make sure it's raw, right from the cow. Don't have any of this store stuff.
Wow, do you have an actual cow?
No. We know a farmer that we're friends with where we get milk and stuff from. But that, I love the bulletproof coffee and really the butter. We know where the butter comes from as well. And I just call it my brain food almost, and it's not just the caffeine, but just that it's how I get my day started every day amongst other things. But anyway, that's one habit that most people think's absurd.
Okay. And what is one common myth in the industry that you can debunk?
That you don't have to start with a single family home or a duplex, or just like we talked about. You can start with a larger apartment community, and it may not happen as quickly. You could do a deal faster if you started with single family. Most people probably. However, if you're willing to put the time in and just be a little more patient, you'll build a bigger brand and bigger business you're going to scale faster if you're a little more patient and focus on larger multifamily.
Okay, love it. And I would say from personal experience, I've acquired 156 unit and 150 single families. The payoff on 156 unit was a lot more than I would say the 150 or so single families.
I can't imagine trying to manage 150 single family homes.
Yeah, it was a pain. So that's a whole nother conversation in itself. And so last question is, why do you believe we're all here on earth?
Well, I'm a Christian, and I serve the Lord, and I my family does, and I believe we are all here to worship our Savior, Jesus Christ, ultimately.
Okay. Understood. So where can people find you, Whitney?
LifeBridgeCapital.com. You can reach me, Whitney, at LifeBridgeCapital.com. You can text or call 540-585-4338. I would encourage you to also look at our mission, our why behind what we do, and that's helping families that are in the adoption process of children.
Awesome. Always pleasure catching up with you, Whitney. Keep doing big things. And thanks everyone so much for tuning in to the Real Estate Experience. Just below, those of you on the YouTube, hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. Thanks so much, Whitney.
Thank you, Sterling.
Thanks for listening to the Real Estate Experience. If this has brought you any value, please subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to me. Now go out there and crush it.